a agricultural specialist, Dr. Peterson, and myself. I was the clinical nutritionist. And my job was to talk to all the people who were going to go overseas and study the various countries and tell them what to expect in nutrition when they went overseas. That was my job. And I went on the tour myself. I went to Libya. And the head man was from Temple University in Philadelphia. He said, we have a hard time working here because the Muslims take Friday off. The Americans take Sunday off. And I don't suppose there's any Adventists among us. And I spoke up. I said, yes, I'm an Adventist. He said, there goes Saturday. 3 days, so we have only 4 days in the week to work. He was really worried about it, how we could get all our work done in just the 4 days. You know, he put out his hand, and it was beefy red. I put mine out. It doesn't look yellow now, but it looked quite yellow. You'd think I'd been drinking a lot of carrot juice. I hadn't. I don't know what the yellow was from, but they took my blood because we were checking our lab to make sure we could do the blood test properly. We did the micro technique for vitamin A, vitamin C, and beta carotene, these things. And so they took my blood, and my beta carotene was sky high. I hadn't been eating carrots or anything like this. I don't know why it was that high, but it was high. But it was okay. Anyway, vitamin D is extremely important for osteoporosis prevention. Okay? Now, how much should you have? And there's 2 kinds of vitamin D that you can get. And when they do a blood test, they put the 2 kinds together and tell you what your total is. Sources of vitamin D: sunlight. Vitamin D3 is made from ultraviolet irradiation from lanolin, wool grease, or the fat in the tail of the sheep. It's an animal product, vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 is ultraviolet irradiated from the ergosterol in yeast. That's vegetarian. But the vitamin D3 seems to be much more effective than the vitamin D2. It's added to some foods, such as milk. But they check the milk. It's supposed to be 400 international units per cup, something like that. But they check the milk, and it's up and down. Some has very little, some has quite a bit. But it's not very well standardized. It's added to milk, and some places added to the butter. Now, here's something exciting. If you have excessive exposure to sunlight, can you get too much vitamin D? No. When you get too much, it destroys it. Unusual. You need it to have vitamin D, but if you get too much, it destroys it. I've never heard of any nutrient like that. But you get too much sunlight, you can get sunburn. So the recommendation is get all the sunshine you can without getting sunburn. Now, they do have in these little saloons where they give them irradiated stuff, ultraviolet light, to give them suntan, artificial suntan. If you change the bulb to the kind that doesn't do the suntanning much, but it will do vitamin D lots, that's good. And there's a doctor who has a laboratory in Boston who believed in that and started recommending it. He was a dermatologist, physician, and they threw him out of the Dermatology Society because he was recommending this. And the society said, you're going to give people cancer. Now, Australia is the skin cancer center of the world. They have lots of sun out there. So out there, broad-brimmed hats, all kinds of things to avoid the sunshine. Because they were so good at teaching this, they got people who were vitamin D deficient. and so it was a real problem. Now, when this doctor in Boston was recommending this, I tried to get him on the phone once, but the physicians all over the country were calling him because he was the expert. And I finally got to talk to him about this and how much do we really need. And then there was also an endocrinologist at Creighton University, Catholic University in Nebraska. He was all for us getting more sunshine. And those people were pushing it because they were saying 400 international units is not enough. So they changed it. They're talking about 600, 800 now. But we all need more than what they used to think. Now, what are the diseases related to vitamin D lack? These little children in Libya, on their mother's back, not getting sunshine because they were in this little basket on the back with a cloth around them. They weren't exposed to sunshine. They were getting vitamin D deficiency. What happens? What happens right here at the wrists, you get an enlargement this direction. And where the rib meets the cartilage in the rib cage, there would be a swelling there. We call it the rachitic rosary. You go down here and feel all these beads. And then the brain, the skull gets out of shape. We call it craniotabes, more square. The brain gets out of shape. And, of course, the long bones in the legs, bow. Vitamin D deficiency. As soon as the babies got off their mother's back and ran around without clothes on in the sunshine over there in Libya, it cleared up. They got well. But there's a lot of diseases we thought might be due to lack of vitamin D. Now, we think osteoporosis can be due to lack of vitamin D because vitamin D controls the absorption of calcium. Okay? And here it gives you the serum blood levels, what it should be. It should be at least to 30 nanograms, and some of them say up as high as 60 nanograms per milliliter. So we show you how much it really should be. We have lots of osteoporosis in this country. But they go by the T cell thing. Let me see here where I talk about that. Let's see. Maybe I didn't talk. Oh, I know. It's under my osteoporosis booklet. Let's look at the osteoporosis booklet. Here it is. See, women in their risk of a hip fracture is about 1 in 6. Breast cancer is only 1 in 9. So osteoporosis is common. Fractures. Now, the women get more fractures than the men. So osteoporosis is a bigger problem with women. Why? Because they're born with smaller bones. The men lose as much as the women lose, but the men start with more because they have bigger bones. So they don't get the problem like the women have. The lifetime risk of women dying from a fracture is the same as the risk of dying of breast cancer. So that's quite important. But let's get a little further back. Diagnosis, where is it? The T-score. I want to talk about this T-score. Yeah. Further back here, is as a T-score what it is. And a T-score is something that the World Health Organization established just by definition. Osteoporosis is just established by definition. How close are you to a 30-year-old man who's in good shape? If you're 2.5 standard deviations from that, you have osteoporosis. That's the way they diagnose it. Now, that's not fair. They shouldn't compare me, 97 years of age, with a 30-year-old man. So we have another kind of score we use. That is the score we ought to use, I think. Let me see if I can find it here. Anyway, it shouldn't be the T-score. It should be the score where it measures you compared to other people your age. But when they get above 80, they don't make that comparison anymore. So you can't get what that score is. But I want to know, the doctor says you ought to take these pills here. They're going to help you improve your T-score. Well, I said to the doctor, what's my chance of having a hip fracture this next year? He said 5%. Oh, I said, good, 95% chance I won't have one. So why should I take the medicine? I'm kind of opposed to medicines if I don't have to take them. And so I didn't take any medicine for it. Okay? But there's a sheet here which shows bone strength is due to what? Bone quantity. That's density inside. That has to do more with calcium. Bone quality. Estrogens, we thought, helped the women to prevent the osteoporosis. After the menopause, they have a higher risk. But if you give them estrogens, it causes more microfracture in the bones. So we don't think that's good. The bone turnover. You know, the skin, we change it every 7 years, completely new skin. Every day, we're changing our bones the same way. It's changing. The bone turnover rate is important. So there's 3 factors which has to do with fracture. We don't have any good indication what your risk of a fracture is. There's no measurement that we have that will tell you what your risk is of a fracture of the bone. Well, drinking more milk, more calcium, does that help? You know, I grew up in China, and we drank more milk in our family than any other family on the compound. I had 3 fractures. Now, of course, when I fell off the new church building they were building, you know, I was on the roof. And they pounded something in there with just one nail in the middle. And I put my foot on it, and I fell down. Fell off. My head hit one of the boards on the scaffolding going up on the outside and broke the board in 2. I had a bad neck for a long time. But, you know, when you do things like this, you can break a bone no matter how much calcium you've had. Okay? That's my brother, he's skating, roller skating, and hit the corner of a building right here. And he saw what happened. His wrist here broke, and his hand popped up. He pulled it out and pushed it down, set it perfectly. He became an orthopedist. But we don't have really a good estimate who's going to have a fracture and who isn't. This osteoporosis, the T-score, does not measure it very well. Does not measure it very well at all yet.
Well, stay off the roof after age 65.
Yeah, that's right. Stay off the roof after age 65. But I think you should read this about osteoporosis. Exercise is the best preventive there is. They took infants at 6 months of age and managed to exercise them, their arms, the things, and the bones got stronger. Now, we used to say, getting more calcium in your bones is great. It's going to make them stronger. Well, that's only one of the three that has to do with this. And all scientists, including advanced scientists, before 1902 or 20,002 and 3, all said that if you eat a lot of protein, meat, it's going to make you excrete in the urine more calcium. And where is the calcium in the body? Bones primarily. So we said it's destroying the bones. See? But in 2003, they wanted to be sure of that, so they studied protein as it's related, whether animal or vegetable, both, as it's related to the calcium in the bone. They found with the more protein you got, you had more calcium going into the bone. It wasn't taking it out of the bones. You had more excretion, but you were absorbing more in the intestinal tract. That's why you had more to excrete. So all scientists, since 2005, have said that old saying we used to say is not true. When you do get more protein, the calcium is getting more in the bones, even though you're excreting more calcium in the urine. Now, if you need more calcium, how much do you need? You know, it used to be, we thought maybe 500 milligrams was enough. That's what the World Health Organization used to say. We have two groups. The one group says you need lots of it, and the other group says, no, you don't need very much. I'm on the side that says you don't need very much. But somebody like Connie Weaver, who's done more studies than anybody else in the country on the absorption of calcium from various foods, she thinks you need at least 3 cups of milk a day. And the U.S. government says you need 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day. Well, 1 cup of milk is about 400 international units, but it's added to it. So you need at least 3 cups, really, according to their schedule. But I don't think that's a good way to tell. See, what they're going by is intake compared to excretion. Balance studies, they call it. You should have as much intake as you excrete in the urine. That's the way they do it. Dr. Hegstead, the little short, small, tiny man, Mormon that taught me in School of Public Health, he would get on the scale every morning to make sure he hadn't lost an ounce or two. But he was skinny. He was the smartest man. He became a congressional advisor on nutrition. And he taught me, he was my major professors. And he said you should never use balance studies to decide what you need of anything. He took prisoners in Peru and did studies on them and changed their diet around. And he got balance on 700 milligrams. You can get balance on 300 milligrams. What we need to do is go around the world and see how much calcium people are getting and see if they're growing okay. Now, if we're getting too much calcium, we'd be a solid cement block. It's not happening. If we were getting too little calcium, the bones would be breaking up, we'd blow away. That's not happening. People are getting balance at various levels all around the world. Now, if we thought you needed as much calcium as you got in an American diet, look how many cows we'd have to ship over to China. There's not enough cows in the world to furnish all these countries with that much milk. So we don't think that's quite right, that whole idea about calcium. But since the U.S. said we need a lot, the World Health Organization looks at the U.S. and says, those scientists are smart in the U.S. They have more money to spend on research. Therefore, we're going to go by what they say. And they accept the same thing the U.S. scientists say. But they're going by a balance study, which Hegstead says is the wrong way to go. I remember a man who was head of the pet milk company. He was on the Food and Nutrition Board. And so he asked the group in the committee, how much milk should we recommend every day? The committee was too smart for him. He wanted to use this for advertising purposes. The committee was too smart for him. And they said, you need a certain amount of calcium, but where they get it from, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be from milk. And I thought that was pretty good of the committee to catch what he was trying to do. See, he was going to use it to promote, advertise, you need more milk. But osteoporosis is a big problem, and fracture is a big problem. But as I say, osteoporosis does not correlate very good with fracture risk. And we have nothing that correlates well. But there's 3 things to do to get more calcium. Number 1, cut your intake of salt in half. Salt controls how much calcium you excrete or retain or reabsorb. So if you cut your salt in half, see, when the salt goes out in the urine, it takes the calcium with it. So if you cut your salt intake in half from what the average American gets, it would be like taking a tablet of 900 milligrams of calcium a day. Just the way it affects the excretion. See? So we should cut our salt down. But to cut our salt down is difficult to do. They got salt in everything. You have to do all your cooking in your own kitchen. I ask people in my group sometimes, how much salt are you using? People speak up, I don't use any salt. Don't you eat bread? Yes. Where do you get it from? It's got lots of salt in it. Too much salt. You could be happy with half as much salt. But if they make laws saying you got to cut down on salt, food won't taste any good. People stop buying the food from those companies, and the company will go out of business. This is our problem with the salt. Second thing is, make sure your blood vitamin D level is proper. D controls the calcium absorption. With adequate vitamin D, you will absorb 3 times as much calcium. The third thing is, count your calcium that you're getting in the foods that don't have much oxalate or phytate with them. Otherwise, the calcium combines with the oxalate or phytate, calcium oxalate, insoluble salt, you can't absorb it. Spinach. It's no good for iron, even though there's a lot of iron. No good for calcium, even though there's a lot of calcium. It's got too much oxalic acid. So I have a list here. Maybe it's under the Osteoporosis book. I think it is. I have a list of some of the better foods. Cabbage is not the best. Let's see, where can I find this on the food? I have a page here which shows you what the best foods are. What is it?
What book is that?
Osteoporosis? I think it's in this one, but let me see if it is. I have one here. Maybe it's not. Oh, it's in the calcium book. Calcium book. That's where it is. I got one page there suggesting. So instead of using the American cabbage, you use Chinese greens, bok choy. There's one page there. I list them all. I can't seem to find it. Here it is. Broccoli, bok choy, and other Chinese greens, but not spinach. Kale, okra, turnip greens, almonds. These are pretty good sources of calcium. So if I had to recommend how much calcium you need today, I'd probably put it around 525, 550 milligrams. Why? Because the Epic Oxford study in London showed that the total vegetarians didn't use any dairy products, had 37% more fractures of their bones. But if they got 250 milligrams, no, 525 milligrams of calcium a day, they had no increase in fracture risk. In Poland, they did studies, 2 different groups did studies that showed the people who didn't use any dairy products were getting about 250 milligrams of calcium a day. To bring it up to 525, you would need fortify a tofu, a soy milk or rice milk. You'd need to fortify it the same as cow's milk and take 1 cup a day, because they usually add 300 milligrams of calcium to per cup for all of these fortified milks. So 1 cup of a fortified milk substitute would be enough to bring you up to the Epic Oxford study of 525, where you wouldn't need any more calcium than that. If you get too much calcium by pills, women have more heart attacks. Men get more prostate cancers. Now, another little wrinkle in this thing is colon cancer. People who use more milk have less colon cancer in this country. But you go to Africa, where they don't use any milk, you never see a case of colon cancer. Unless some American or Britisher comes through. They don't get colon cancer over there, and they don't use milk. Something wrong with our science. Okay? Something wrong with our science. But exercise is the best thing. Second best thing, vitamin D. Cut down on salt. Get your calcium in adequate quantities in foods that don't have a lot of oxalate or phytate. Now, it's surprising that soy The calcium is absorbed pretty well from soy products, soy milk. And yet 5% of it is oxalic acid. It's fairly high in oxalic acid, and yet the calcium is absorbed well from soy products. Now, the next subject I want to get over, preserving brain function. Alzheimer's disease. Have you ever been around a person and in 5 minutes they ask you the same question 3 times? Now, older people tend to forget, where did I put my keys? That's normal. But when you find your keys and you don't remember what they're for, that's not normal. And so Alzheimer's get into the not normal area, see? Now, this mental problem, there's about 20% of it, 25% of it that we could treat or avoid. Years ago, about the 1940s, during the World War, had as many as 300,000 people in this country at one time with niacin deficiency. We refined the flour, made white flour, we did things, changed things, and so we had niacin deficiency. Pellagra, the 3Ds, dermatitis, dementia, dermatitis, diarrhea. 4th D is death. We had maybe 100,000 people dying. And the Chicago Board of Health made a statement. It's an infectious disease. Infectious disease? The nutritionists, they said, no, it's a nutritional problem. How were they going to prove to the Chicago Board of Health that it was not an infectious disease? Well, some of them brave ate the fecal matter and urine of patients who had the disease for about 6 months. They later learned it in capsule form, it went better. And anyway, this for about 6 months, and none of them got sick. It's amazing they didn't get sick. So they proved it was not an infectious disease. Lack of niacin. I love to walk the street in the summertime and look at women's elbows. They're walking down the street, you know, with short sleeves on. You can see their elbows. If the elbow is more deeply pigmented and rougher, it's darker, rougher, that's a pellagroid-like lesion. Pellagra-like lesion. Pellagroid lesion. So you can see they're a little bit low in niacin. You can tell this. But a lot of these people were doing crazy things because of the dementia. They were put in jail because of the crazy things they did. And they began to give them niacin when we discovered the thing. And they got well. He got out of jail. It was an interesting thing. Now, you can have B12 deficiency and affect your brain in a similar way. B12 deficiency. So there's some things like this that's treatable, okay? But that's only maybe 20% of it or so that's treatable. But Alzheimer's disease, we really have no good solution yet. The best thing we've found is exercise. People who did 4 different types of exercise every day cut their risk way down. of getting Alzheimer's disease. It appears that you have the same risk factors for heart disease as you do for Alzheimer's. If that's true, Adventists have only half as much disease. We should have only half as much Alzheimer's disease. Do we? We don't know. I asked Gary Fraser this question. He does our Adventist health study work. He said, we applied for a grant to do a study on Alzheimer's. But we didn't have a specialist in our university on Alzheimer's disease, so we never got the money. So he says, I don't know. We ought to know, because right now, the risk factors for heart disease, we think, are practically the same ones as the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. And if Adventists have less heart disease, we should have less Alzheimer's if that is true. We need to know this, whether it's true or not. We don't know. We need to know. People who are more sociable, they usually have less risk of Alzheimer's. People who are more educated have less, more sociable. So they talk to people. People who use longer sentences, they have less chance for Alzheimer's. They have a questionnaire that they use, which can tells you what your risk of Alzheimer's is, and to use it more. They're looking at the spinal fluid and trying to see if they can't find signs there, which tell us who's going to get Alzheimer's and who isn't. But as far as heart disease, vegetarians have 40% lower prevalence of hypertension. We have a lot less heart disease than that is. We have a lot less diabetes. We have less kidney disease, only half as much kidney disease. We have only half as much arthritis. Now, we don't know the reasons for all this, but that's vegetarianism does something. So I want you to take time when you're home to look at these different things. Now, for a while, we thought it was the aluminum in the diet. That was the problem. Because in this brain, you have these aluminum plaques. But here's where the problem is. You have a system in your bloodstream which keeps the aluminum from getting in. The Alzheimer breaks down that system and allows the aluminum to get in. The aluminum didn't cause the disease. The disease messed up the system, so allowed the aluminum in. But for a while, they thought the aluminum was causing the problem. No, it's the other way around. The problem caused the aluminum to get in there. But health-wise, the amount of people that are getting cared for who have Alzheimer's is getting bigger and bigger. It's financially, it's a big problem. We used to think that, some people thought, that they were mixing up the diagnosis between cow's disease. That was not true. Mad cow's disease is you're dead within a year, year and a half. You're younger when you get it, usually. Alzheimer's disease, the caretaker dies before the patient does. Our biggest job is to help to persuade the well-meaning family members who are taking care of this person who has Alzheimer's put the person in an institution, because otherwise they're going to die before the patient does. So the Alzheimer's people live on forever. They don't die. But mad cow disease kills the people quickly. So we aren't mixing up those two. Some people were saying we were mixing them up. We are not. Now, are there any questions any of you would like to ask? Another thing I want you to look at real carefully is dietary iron. I think this is important. Dietary iron. Anemias. There's different kinds of anemias. Iron anemia is a microcytic anemia. It means the red cells are smaller. Fewer of them and smaller. So your hemoglobin goes down. There's another kind of anemia called macrocytic anemia, B12 deficiency, pernicious anemia. That's a macrocytic. The cells are bigger, but there are fewer of them. But you can do a blood test and tell which kind of anemia it is. With the women, doctors ignore them. They just say they're menstruating too much. Too big a flow. They're losing blood. They better look for the cause. With a man, you have to find the cause for sure. But with a woman, it could be something else, such as cancer. You're losing blood in the intestinal tract. And you need to try to find out why you're anemic. And rather than just assuming it's because of too heavy menstrual flow. There are certain things like tea and coffee which decrease the absorption of iron, for example. So in Bangladesh, this lady that lost 4 babies due to have another one was anemic. You have to pay money for pills. I said, stop your tea drinking. Your tea drinking is decreasing the absorption of the iron you're getting in your food. So that's what I tried to get her to do. That's hard to do. Change a culture. When a person's used to drinking tea all their life, 8-10 cups a day, it's hard to get them to change. But that's what we needed to do. Okay, now any questions any of you have? Yes.
So it's not aluminum in the white flour that you put so much in there to move the flour and stuff?
It's not the aluminum, no. Now, I should mention one other thing I have in the packet. How did Jesus eat when he ate out? When he went to potluck, what did he do? 4 points, Spirit of Prophecy tells us what he did. First point, he went to the social gathering. Pharisees said, don't go mix with those sinners. He went to the gathering. That's the one thing he did different. Second thing, when he went there, he did not overeat, it says. Third thing, he didn't eat of everything on the table. But the other thing it says, he did everything quietly. He didn't say, friends, you got cake on the table. You shouldn't be having that. He didn't do that. He did everything quietly. So I think what Sister White says about how Jesus ate when he was on earth, I thought were very good principles. Go to these associations. Go to them. Be sociable with the people. Don't overeat. You don't have to eat everything that's on the table, you know. And eat just those things that are best for you. Okay?
Hi, Dr. Scharffenberg. How you doing this evening?
Fine.
Good. I'm in your book, Preserving Brain Function.
Yes.
And on page 9,
Yes.
you made a suggestion at age 70, register for a chemistry course to keep your brain working. So I'm asking, I used to be a high school math teacher,
Yes.
so I'm asking if adults don't want to go to community college and take a course, can the adults teach somebody younger to keep their brain working?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But the people who had PhDs, they had less Alzheimer's. People who studied more had less Alzheimer's. So we should keep getting our brain working, keep getting educated, even though we're older, not going to regular school. We should do something. Keep the brain active. Okay?
Is there a ratio between calcium and magnesium?
Well, I don't think that is so important. You know, we need to use whole grains instead of white flour. We did a study at Loma Linda Food Company when I was there. We did a study. We took all the products, on the shelf, the dry cereals, cornflakes, all these shredded wheat, took these products, and then we found out what they used for their starting ingredient. You refine it more and more, and when you go from whole grain product to white flour product, you lose 90% of your magnesium. So I think if we do something about that, that's the main thing. We should have more magnesium than we're having because of refining. We should stop the refining, eating more whole grains, whole products to get the magnesium.
Question is, if you take a blood test for calcium, what is a desirable count, or however you say that?
I don't know that I would do it for calcium. I would do it for vitamin D.
Vitamin D is what I mean.
Oh, vitamin D? Yes. It should be, I think, from 30 to 60. There's two ways of doing it. And I have it in the vitamin D book, what it is.
And
30 to 60 milligrams per millimeter, nanograms per milliliter.
also, what type of calcium is recommended?
What type of calcium should you take? Nutritionists say get your nutrients as far as possible from food, not from pills. Okay? So, now the dairy products, of course, give you plenty of calcium. And I gave you a list of other foods that have calcium in it. But the major thing, cut down the salt. That controls the calcium you're losing from the urine, you see? Get adequate D in your blood. Make sure what your blood level is, that you are having adequate level. You absorb more. And make sure the food you count that has calcium doesn't have a lot of oxalate or phytate with it to form insoluble salts. So those are the main principles on calcium. But I don't think you need as much as the U.S. government is saying you need based on the balance studies. You can get balance at any level. As long as your bones are halfway decent, I wouldn't worry about the calcium level. I don't want to get too much calcium because it increases heart attacks in women and it increases prostate cancer in men. So I don't want to get, I tell men if they're drinking milk, don't get more than a cup a day because of too much calcium, too much milk, too much prostate cancer. Okay.
What is osteopenia?
That's before you get osteoporosis.
Oh, okay.
Just one step earlier.
Well, what can you do to prevent it or
Well,
treat it?
Well, exercise is the best thing. Exercise. Weight-bearing exercise. Not swimming. Weight-bearing exercise, okay, is what you need. And the next thing is get the calcium, like I told you. Cut down salt. Make sure your D is proper in your blood level. And get foods that have calcium that don't have oxalate and phytate with it. Okay? Okay.
You mentioned tea as a negative
Yes.
for losing calcium.
Yes.
tea is such a big word in my understanding because I make a tea of every herb there is.
Well, I'm
So-
thinking of English tea.
Okay.
Okay, now let's
The
talk
black
about the other teas,
Okay.
herbal teas.
Uh-huh.
The General Conference has a nutrition council, and the one who knows most about the herbal teas is Dr. Winston Craig. He headed their nutrition department at EMC many years. He retired up at Walla Walla, comes down here in the winter for a month now, but he knows the most about it. Our problem is we don't have enough studies on the teas.
Mm-hmm.
So most herbal teas, we say, are okay if you're only going to have a cup or two a day. But if you think it's good because it's going to cure something, and so you're taking 10 cups a day, there's always something bad in it, and the bad thing now might show up and cause you the problem.
Uh-huh.
So we say, herb teas, we say, it's okay if you want to use it, but don't go overboard because we don't know enough about them yet.
And you won't get any work done either with 10 cups.
Yeah, that's right.
One more thing. I've been reading that dental hygiene is also a cause of heart attack or heart disease.
What is?
Dental hygiene. Yes.
Oh,
For heart
poor dental
attack
hygiene?
And,
Yes.
and for Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's surprising, but the dental stuff is greatly related to the whole body. Other diseases. Greatly related, yes. And heart disease and osteoporosis are related. People don't know that. People with osteoporosis more apt to have heart disease. Heart disease patients more apt to have osteoporosis. The medicines used to lower the cholesterol are the medicines used to help getting less osteoporosis. There's a close relationship between these two.
Thank you for your information. But now I feel so overwhelmed to be able to accomplish something like this. How do you get...
All right, I'm going to help him from being overwhelmed. I'm going to give you a university nutrition course now in one sentence. Yeah, all right. That's what you need to know. Here's my one-sentence university course in nutrition. Eat at the proper times. No snacking. Eat at the proper time. A variety, not a large variety of one meal or you'll get overweight. But over a week's time, a variety to get all the nutrients of natural, unprocessed foods. That wouldn't be meat. Okay, in quantities for ideal weight. That's what you need to know. That's basic things. Okay? You don't have to know, be a PhD. You don't have to have all training to know how to eat right. But get the foods in the natural state. Okay? Elizabeth.
Yes. Is vitamin D just an umbrella over D2, D3? If I go to buy a supplement, do I want D3? Do I want it to say D?
Okay.
What is
D3
the-
seems to work better in restoring the levels to where it ought to be and doing the job. It seems to be a lot better than D2.
How about just D? If it says D on a
If
bottle.
you don't know which it is if it just says D.
Oh, okay, so D3 is the best to buy.
Yes, it's the better one.
And it's good for COVID,
Yes.
that one. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Doctor, we hear from other speakers that drinking sodas make us lose more calcium in the urine. Is any true on that?
Well, you know, this is what we were saying about the meat and proteins. We were saying the same thing. And I'm not sure that is a good line of reasoning. Now, there's reasons we shouldn't be using all these sodas and things. Right now, they don't like you to even use juices. They don't want you to use juices. A lot of good in juices. But you're bypassing the digestion in the mouth. okay? And lots of times they put, when you go to restaurant, they put ice cubes in it. What does the ice do to it? Your dad was the one that straightened me out on that one. Yeah, radiologists. Because the radiologists, when they want to look at the x-ray of the small intestine, they don't want the patient sitting in the office waiting a long time for this barium meal that they took to get to the small intestine. They put ice cubes with it to make it go through fast. It goes through faster. I used to say it took time for it to warm up before it got digested. Your dad straightened me out on that. No, it goes through faster. You don't get it digested because it's going too fast through you. So I don't think we should have ice cubes in our water at the restaurants. I don't think we should have water at the mealtime. That should be between meals that we should have the water. Yeah, that's right. That's right. We've been talking about fruit juice, not using fruit juices, and Jesus is waiting to drink grape juice with us when we get to heaven. So I can't be too strong on that point against juices.
I'm reading here in the paper Dietary Iron. It says that number 3, dairy milk decreases iron absorption greatly due to its calcium content. So we shouldn't be drinking milk with our salads.
Well, see, if you have something with iron in it, you shouldn't have milk at that same meal. That's right. Milk decreases the absorption of the iron greatly. So if you want to keep getting iron sources, get the iron in foods separate from when you have milk if you're using milk.
And
What's that? Well, I've never seen any study done on almond milk to see what it did with iron absorption. So I don't know. But cow's milk, we know what it does.
so and also it mentions that vitamin C helps the absorption of iron. So we should put some
100%.
So
Vitamin C, at the same time you have your iron in the food, increases the absorption 100%.
So we put lemon on our salads. Now,
Anyway, these are just kind of interesting things to know. But I gave you the one-sentence course to make it simple.
now, yes, in relation of salt.
Yes.
Salt is a refined product. Do you think that we should use sea salt instead? That it has other minerals, trace minerals, and
No, it doesn't have much minerals. It's still
No, really?
99% salt, same thing. Very little difference.
okay.
Very little difference.
What about the ratio between I forgot, sodium and potassium?
Okay.
Should we care?
We should have, this is a bad thing right now. We should have more potassium and less sodium. And we're getting it turned around the other way. We need much more potassium. That's why we say more fruits and vegetables. That's where we get the potassium. And that means no potato chips.
Okay.
You keep the salt shaker off the table. Don't put the salt shaker on the table, and
I used to see in the market, in a corner where the salt is, potassium salt. Is that okay?
don't do it unless the doctor tells you to, because it's dangerous. We
Okay.
can get people get sick from getting too much potassium medicinally.
Okay.
So you shouldn't do it without the doctor's advice. Anyway, this is a start on your trip of knowing something about nutrition. I'm trying to give you an overview of it and more detail in the books to read. And we'll come on 2 more times to try to cover more.
Yes, we're going to have our next meeting is going to be Wednesday 7 p.m. And I'm going to ask you for a special prayer. Pray that the government won't close up for the last meeting, because this new president is going to sign like 10 different executive orders, and I think one of them is closing up the country. So pray for us.
Now, I didn't say much about the coffee. I gave you a lot more reasons why coffee isn't good. One is nitrosamine formation, a carcinogenic substance in the stomach.
Yeah.
When you get nitrates in here, your body turns some of that into nitrosamine. A cup of coffee compared to a cup of water increases the production of nitrosamines tenfold. There's a lot of interesting little things in here you can see like that. So that makes coffee not good for us.
What do you think about cereal coffees?
Okay. You know, Ellen White talks against coffee, tea, and similar drinks. So we have to find out what is wrong with the coffee and tea and not take other drinks that don't have it. So we can get cereal coffees that I think are okay because they don't have those things in them. So in Germany, they started making all kinds of cereal coffees. And I think they're okay because they don't have the caffeine or the theobromine.
I forgot the name of the chemical that is formed on very fried food and toasted food when it's making the food brown in the skillet. I forgot the name of it.
The browning effect.
That is not recommended. So will that affect the cereal coffees too, because they had to toast that to nothing to be brown to make it?
No, that's not going to affect that.
No? Okay.
That's not going to affect that.
Okay.
No. All right, thanks everybody for coming tonight.